Happy Friday, everybody. Week is over. Not that that really means anything in this COVID environment in which we all live. Happy Friday to you, Jack. How was your Thursday?
Wonderful. Thank you, Seth. And yours?
Great, fabulous, fabulous.
Nice.
Moving the ball forward, as we say, Jack. Moving the ball forward. Boy, what a chock full. The Republican Party is the gift that keeps giving, except now it's giving more subtly, isn't it, Jack?
I think it's giving more quietly.
Well, this doesn't seem quiet, does it?
Ah, is that
Submitted for your approval, a
who?
one
Who is on our
Mar-
left there?
Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she is surrounded by a woman emulating her dress, a doofus on the right in gray flannel, and somebody who looks very uncomfortable to be next to her.
Interesting. Now, this
I don't know
lady,
who these people are.
with all due respect, she represents the 14th district of Georgia. Now, they say that it's heavily Republican. She basically won by default because the other guy knew he couldn't win because he was more liberal. Tell me about the 14th district.
The 14th district is a district that voted for Marjorie Taylor Greene by Jack. She won by 73%.
So, what do you think this district is made up of? Hollers or,
It's made up of people that it's made up of people that we're going to learn about when we go to our very next segment. Not that we're doing it now, but we're going to talk about the op-ed in the LA Times written by Chris Starwalt, who is he's a newspaper man.
He's an unemployed ex-Fox News.
Yeah. You know what his mistake was, Jack?
I do, Seth. He, in fact, predicted the Biden win in Arizona before anybody else did, and they went ballistic. The viewers went absolutely. All the Catholic mail started rolling in, and they fired him. And he wrote an absolutely brilliant op-ed that, as you notice, that dovetails with what you and I have been talking about for weeks.
Well, maybe we should quote him and then talk about Marjorie Taylor Smith.
Okay.
I tell you what, let me just read this for everybody. The op-ed reads in part, when I defended the call for Biden in the Arizona election, I became the target of murderous rage from consumers who were furious at not having their views confirmed. Having been cosseted by self-validating coverage for so long, many Americans now consider any news that might suggest that they are in error or that their side has been defeated as an attack on them personally. The lie that Trump won the 2020 election wasn't nearly as much aimed at the opposing party as it was at the news outlets that stated the obvious, incontrovertible fact. While there is still a lucrative market for balanced offering of news and opinion at high-end outlets, I wonder what high-end outlets means, like the New Yorker maybe, much of the mainstream is increasingly bent towards flattery and fluff. Most stories are morally complicated and don't have white hats and black hats. Defeats have many causes and victories are never complete. Reporting these stories requires skill and dispassion. But hearing them requires something of consumers too. Enough humility to be open to learning something new.
Praise Jesus.
Well, now here we find finally somebody who dispassionately, and math is just about as dispassionate as you can get, somebody who is immersed in the right-wing thought bubble.
Did you notice, Seth, that at the end of his article, he said something very, very interesting that we just touched on. He said when radio and television came in, we had to wait years for the public to grow into it. How
Yeah.
long is it going to take for the internet? And I thought
Yeah.
that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. So I wonder the same thing. And he also said that one of the interesting byproducts of the internet age is that stories that come out first, in other words, getting the scoop, so to speak, really doesn't have a value anymore. As a matter of fact, sometimes it can go comedically wrong. So getting a scoop used to be, the article started out with a reference from the 1840s when somebody rented a steamboat and steamed down the Hudson to beat the New York Times to calling an election in a statewide race.
Well, that's because that's because he had a printing press in the steamboat.
Brilliant.
Okay, so he would print the results right there, and then he would distribute his papers 2 hours, whatever it took to get down from Albany and then write your story, right?
Right. And, so 180 years ago, that's kind of where we are. But now we're so rewiring the brains of Western civilization that, and this also, frankly, goes for our educational system. Our educational system is something that's just simply not set up to tackle the needs of a COVID reality. It's just not.
That's true. And the other thing, I was thinking this morning when I read that article, I said, we have a group, a huge mass of people who feel totally entitled by their race, their religion, their work, whatever the hell it is. They are so entitled, Seth. They are entitled not to be wrong.
Yeah.
And that's where the rubber meets the road here. They are so entitled, they think that they cannot be wrong.
So the information streams are the most important thing that are central to our ethos. They're central to our sense of self.
Yes. Our
And
whole identity.
And the entitlement now that you're suggesting is one that extends to those information streams rather than other areas of entitlement that we encounter in the outside world, like race.
That's why he got fired from Fox News. He did not give them the information they felt entitled to.
Right.
End of story.
Right. Well, that's not healthy.
No.
And just kind of buried right underneath that story is the story about how, world leaders on the fringes are now saying, you know what? COVID's going to last forever. Isolation leads nowhere. Now, admittedly, that's Jair Bolsonaro. Now he's a guy who is a ultra right wing, Brazilian president. He's ultra right wing, and he's one of these, anti-maskers. Why are we stopping the economy? Essentially, an ignoramus. But it raises an interesting question. What if the core of that statement happens to be true? That COVID isn't going anywhere, that there will be infinite mutations, and that this is the new reality for maybe the rest of our lives and for our children's future. What does that mean about a global economy? Because we can't move on with yet another 10,000 businesses going under in the near term in this country. We just can't do that. So one wonders what kind of tumult is coming, especially because Fauci this morning just said, these variants are not stopping and we have to inoculate everybody as quickly as possible. That's terrifying.
there's also something I read, which was interesting. There are people who believe that a quarter to a third of the population is naturally immune. And we all can give examples of that. Johan had it for 3 weeks. He lived in a tiny apartment in Stockholm with his wife and baby, and they did not get it.
I agree.
So let's look at that. There is going to be a pretty big segment of the population that is immune. And they're going to figure out why they are immune,
Right.
what part of the DNA structure causes this, and deal with it. What do they call it in engineering? Back engineer. Okay. The ultimate
reverse engineer their immunity.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I thought
that's interesting, Jack. Do you think that the what did they call the sky trails? What did they call those, Jack? Where the planes flew over at high altitude and left lines in the sky. What was that called?
Contrails.
Yeah. Do you think that the federal contrails were spraying natural immunity in the air, and that those people ended up breathing that in? Is that any crazier than anything else that we're talking about?
It's not crazier than Marjorie Green, who thinks that Parkland, all the school shootings were false flags operation.
And then Kevin McCarthy places her on the education committee.
Isn't that amazing?
It just goes to show the depths to which the fuck you is important for the Republican Party.
Yep, it is. And if you take a state like Kentucky, who has Mitch McConnell and what's his name, the libertarian,
Rand Paul Jr.
Two of the absolutely, talk about clown outfits. And then you have this asshole from Georgia. Can't we just sort of deal with this area somehow, Seth?
No. The answer is no. The answer is this is what becoming a more perfect union looks like. You can't pop a pimple until it's ready. A fever won't break until it's the highest point. You got to sweat it out. Life is pain. Dealing with these people this is what we have to do to get to the next. It wasn't going to be easy no matter how we did it. But there are people that are, I'm having a conversation on Facebook with the aforementioned forest-dwelling sapsucker, Mr. X. Mr. X is a troll on Facebook who is so desperate to own libs because of a deep-seated resentment. And, you and I have gone back and forth. What is the value of engaging with these people? Why do you do it? Why do you bother? I'm blocking this person. Why aren't you blocking this person? And I thought, well, I'm going to do what Sun Tzu says, and that is study your enemy. No matter what, study your enemy so you can steal from them. You can steal ideas and steal ways to defeat them. Well, sure enough, after this individual, who will not be Mr. X, has been blocked from Facebook for 35 days. So that, the Zuckerberg thought police, he's so outspoken with right-wing bullshit and lies that he cloaks in misdirection and, whataboutism and all the rest of this shit. For instance, the latest misdirection was Janet Yellen's speaking fees to all of the organizations that she is now about ready to regulate. Okay. That's not really the issue in our economy right now, is it? At any rate, come to find out that the forest-dwelling sapsucker, who is a woodsman, a Maine woodsman, sells firewood, that I have helped him. I go out of my way to promote his business as often as I can because I'm a masochist. The this individual got a 1380 on his SATs and has a dual major, 2 degrees from the University of Maine. Well, he decided to go into it again this morning because now he's unchained and back on Facebook. And he started, spewing more bullshit. And I thought, gee, well, I got to talk to Jack about this because this illustrates the IQ EQ divide that we were talking about in the GOP and what the problem is. And I just happened to be joined by Mario and John, 2 people who I lived with. And Mario grew up in Chinatown, one of the coolest dudes in the history of ever, Mario Page. And John Morris, who was a DJ for, I think he was on LIU for a while. I'm not sure. At any rate, these are people from Park Slope. And I said, let's do a thought experiment. What would happen if we took a 14-year-old Mr. X and placed him in with us at Brooklyn Friends School in 1980? And this guy was able to get a 1380 on the SAT, except he would have done it within the cultural context of forward-thinking, diverse opinion, accepting, intelligent intellectuals in Brooklyn Heights. Where would he be today? Probably would have gone to Brown.
It's interesting. I can understand him, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, fairly smart guy.
Yeah.
Who something pissed him off really badly at one point in his youth. Just like the preppies of Princeton, New Jersey, the preppies of prep school and Princeton really fucking pissed me off. And I still carry that gene against rich people, preppies, entitled rich people. I still carry it, and it dominates a lot of my life. I look at it, I understand it, I can analyze it, but still. So the question is, did something really piss him off? Was he exposed to something in the educational system that he felt was pretentious and not him? Or did he decide he was better at kicking somebody in the balls than he was at arguing with them intellectually on an educated level?
Yeah. I mean, because he keeps losing horrifically, when he engages with people intellectually, because the facts aren't on his side. I mean, he just keeps losing. It's really, kind of a laughable thing. But it doesn't, prevent him from engaging in a way that he, that he thinks is going to do him some good. So I don't know. I really couldn't tell you.
It's beyond it's beyond analysis, Seth. It's not what will do you good, is what intuitively and emotionally you feel like this is the way I'm going to respond. I don't give a shit if I'm going to end up in jail. I don't give a shit if most people I know are going to think I'm an idiot. Let me give you another example. Individual 2, who I'm very good friends with, is a tradesman. I was talking to him on the phone yesterday, and we talk, and he talks about going into these places, wholesale places, where he can buy supplies for his trade. Nobody will look at him, and nobody will talk to him. He's known them for years. He's done business for years, with them. Nobody will even recognize that he's there because he's an anti-Trumper. Here's what really caught me. At one point he said, and the worst of these people are the religious ones, the ones that go to church. And I'm thinking, hold on a minute. This is fascinating. what kind of equation can we build out of this? Now, probably the most well-known story in the Bible is Moses going up on the mountain to get the Ten Commandments. Everybody down there waiting for him to get down gets bored and impatient and builds a golden calf. Okay, this is the most obvious, most read, most appreciated story in the Bible. Okay, in the Old Testament. So when they're tired, in generations they've been waiting for God to reappear, and He hasn't. In fact, they lost their job at the tire rack. You know, they're sitting on the bar stool. Life sucks. Their wife left them. Their kids hate them. So Jesus hasn't shown up. And all of a sudden, Donald Trump shows up. He's not the golden calf. He's the Cheeto pig, because that's what he looks like. He shows up. Moses is up on the mountain. They gravitate toward him, just like the golden calf. And there they are, and they cannot let go of him because he, in their minds, is the second coming. He is God on earth because they've transferred, in their frustration, they've transferred their enthusiasm for this omniscient being to Donald J. Trump, because he said he was religious. Does he go to church? No. Is he an immoral person? Absolutely. I've even heard people say, well, I can't fault him because I am guilty of some of those same faults. So they transferred this, Seth, to Donald J. Trump, and they cling to it.
Yeah, so I guess it's left to us to figure out, what set the preconditions for that emotional state for, 74 million people to worship the Cheeto golden calf, and ignore, by the way, absolutely ignore the truth.
Yeah. Which brings us back to the fact that
the truth, right? So I'm going to ask you a question now. Do you remember going down, I think it was Fifth Avenue, Jack, and where it intersects with Broadway at like 23rd Street?
Yeah.
Hiya, Jeff. How are you, buddy? Jeff, I'm glad you had errands to take care of. That's good that you took care of them.
Can we ask Jeff what kind of errands was he running this morning? Because I'm really truly interested in
I tell you what, let's table what Jeff was doing this morning and talk about what the KGB was doing in the 80s. Okay.
I want to hear what Jeff was doing.
I really don't. So I'm reading the book that they're talking about, American Compromise. Okay, that we were talking about on Drudge on Wednesday. American Compromise. I download the book and I'm reading it now. Here's my capsule review. Yeah, he's totally a Russian asset. No, there's no question that Donald Trump is a Russian asset. There is no question that Donald Trump is a Russian asset. That the level of his, let me put it to you this way. Donald Trump is so stupid that he wouldn't have been able to be someone that could have engaged in active measures for the KGB. They engaged in just using him and cultivating him starting 40 years ago. Okay. Yep. There was a TV and electronics store that it was on 23rd Street and the corner of Fifth Avenue at the toy, they call it the toy building, the toy center. It's an old kind of 1800s Victorian era building that still exists today. And on the ground floor was a TV store called Joy something. And it had a big sign in the window that I thought at the time in 1980 was very strange. And the big sign in the window said, "We speak Russian."
Okay.
And this was a store that sold electronics, but no Americans went in there because they sold televisions that used the Russian TV format. In other words, a Russian could go back to Russia and buy a TV here, and the TV wouldn't have any use for them because the format was incorrect. So they go to this place, and these guys bought TVs that could be used in Russia. And if you were a KGB agent or a Russian operative of any sort, and you were in the intelligence or the foreign service field, you would stop anywhere in the United States. When you flew home, you would fly out of JFK. So everybody in the KGB would go and use this store as a meeting place. They would load up on camcorders and TVs, then fly back to Russia with all their booty that could be used in Russia. It was run by two Russian assets. It was a Russian KGB operation right on Fifth Avenue and 23rd Street, right? Where do you think Donald Trump bought all of the television sets for the Grand Hyatt New York?
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding.
But tell me, what was the difference in the format?
It was like it was an electronics thing. It was not a processing thing, but there's a difference between the old Russian format, which used the European television format, and the American format, which was unique to America. So there was no interoperability.
Well, if you bought them for the Grand Hyatt, they must have worked.
Right. No, he bought them. No, he bought, in other words, they ordered specially for him, not Russian televisions. But the point is that he was already in the pocket of the KGB when he did the Grand Hyatt New York. And the assumption is that there was some funding that was going on. You remember that the Grand Hyatt New York was the first, I worked at the Grand Hyatt New York starting in 1989 or 1988 or whatever it is. But this was years before it had opened. Well, and yes, the residents were all from Brighton Beach. That's where they ended up going. But the contention early on in American Compromise by Craig Unger is that the Russian mafia has become a very simply a part of the Russian government's foreign service efforts.
Yes. Yes.
And this book begins now. I'm only 2 chapters in, but this book begins to go into chapter and verse of how Donald Trump, the implications of Donald Trump's actions overlay perfectly with him being a Russian asset. We haven't even gotten to the part where the Russian mobsters started buying apartments in Trump Tower as a way to float him for his disastrous business deals.
Yes. As well as that overpriced house in Palm Beach.
Right.
Yeah, so this is so obvious. Maybe that's why everybody misses it, because it's like a comic book set.
It is.
It's so obvious. But what I want to ask you, I have another question. Marjorie Green has mentioned the Russian laser satellite. Jewish.
I'm sorry. I can see how you'd make that mistake, Jack. Not Russian, Jewish.
Yeah, I did make it. So what I want to know, because you're in the know, is this called like Meshuggah 5? And is it controlled from Brooklyn Heights? What are you guys doing with this satellite?
Borough Park. It's controlled from the roof of Beth Israel Hospital, maybe. And it's called the Schwanzenator 3000.
Did you ever hear of the Digital Teamster, the Vinny 2000?
Yeah, the Vinny 2000.
So what are you doing with this, Seth? I mean, you know what these folks are up to.
I prefer not to talk about it. And the funny thing is that there are so many Jews in New York that do the exact same thing for Israel that Donald Trump does for Russia, the idea that this is a unique circumstance is laughable.
Yes.
This is what foreign intelligence agencies do.
Yes.
It's all part of the whole big stew. They work with each other. They don't work with each other. Their interests overlap. Their interests don't overlap. But they develop assets. And the aforementioned Mr. X, the forest-dwelling sapsucker, said, "You mean to suggest that 40 years ago, the KGB began cultivating Donald Trump?" And I said, "Yes, idiot. That's exactly what they did. That's how this works." But Jack, that's how it works for the KGB/FSB.
Mm-hmm.
That's how Russian intelligence works. It's a long play. And the Trump administration is the payoff for all of their long plays.
And
right?
they got lucky because, first of all, Putin, I know, wished that his asset wasn't so fucking stupid.
Yeah.
He wished. Can you imagine what would happen if he hadn't been that stupid? We would be totally fucked. But he said, "Okay,
without question.
Yeah, we have to work with this guy. He's a moron." And then his surprise when he became president.
Right. Well, and of course, thank you, Jeff. Israel is an ally. I could have just as easily said Egypt. I could have just as easily said Yemen. I could have more accurately said Saudi Arabia. All of these intelligence services have people parked in the United States. And that, whether they're allied to us or not, is, to me, it's irrelevant. It's about the activity itself and the assets that they develop.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that one of the assets they developed, one of our prime adversaries, one of the assets they developed was Donald Trump. I find it hard to understand what Russia's ultimate end game is, other than disrupting the concept of modern democracy as a valid way of governance.
Well, there's that, Seth. Very important. They're very successful at it. Okay. No, the other part of the end game, equally as important, is to break the bind between us and our allies in Europe. Huge.
And that seems to be failing.
Yeah.
Because our allies, as I have said before, our system of government showed resilience. You and I are talking about rooting out the disease, our own little virus in Congress. Marjorie Taylor Greene, as well as the bespeckled skank that works with her, and the death of the Republican Party as an operating concern. The bespeckled. Somebody put her in the chat window, please. What the skank with glasses' his name is? The long dark-haired one. Bobbert. Is that what her name is? Bobbert. Yes. Whatever that filthy.
Yes,
that filthy. Like
Lorena.
That.
Yeah.
Lorena Bobbitt is the penis cutter offer.
Well, so's this bitch. I promise.
So's this bitch. And guess what? You're not going to bring your fucking sidearm into the floor of Congress. Nancy Pelosi on the floor said the other day from the speaker's chair, not from the speaker's chair, excuse me, at a presser, the enemy is within on the floor of Congress. Jack, how long do you think these skanks keep their seats?
First of all, I love the expression bespeckled skank. Is that what you called it?
Yeah, this bespeckled skank.
Okay, I love that. That's like when my friend John, R.I.P., once when he heard somebody describe in the news Hillary as resplendent in a lime green pants suit. It's one of the things you'll only hear once in your life. And that's why
you only want to hear it.
Resplendent lime green pantsuit.
In a resplendent lime green pantsuit. Jeff says it was an attempt to cripple our government and economy, which, as Jack suggested, would disrupt us with the rest of the world. It failed. It failed. You
But
know,
see,
now
I don't agree with you. We had this argument the other day. I don't think it failed. It it was successful to a certain degree because our allies are for the next 20 years going to be scared shitless of the potential that we have to elect a moron. Okay.
yeah, but they were, you know what? They knew it before, Jack. I mean, they're not rubes to the American political system, and the Russians themselves are telegraphing it with this. What was the name? Maria
But Bettina,
Butanesca? No, not Putanesca. Butana Maria.
Bettina,
No. Anyway,
puttanesca is an Italian dish, which
it's
is
a horse.
based on,
The horse pasta
that's
sauce.
right,
Yeah,
which
but let's just call it.
exactly
Let's just call it Maria
the
Putanesca.
horse pasta. Right. Okay.
So
Maria
the horse
Bettina.
pasta. The Maria Butina, right? The horse pasta, KGB, NRA nut, right? She fucked her way through the NRA and through the GOP. You think that this NRA bankruptcy thing has anything to do with their financial position? I think they just got to go away because they fucked up.
The NRA is truly, truly the icon of the last 4 years of American stupidity. Okay, it will sit up there glowing for the rest of history.
I'm telling you, man, Biden is racing. You know, now there's a GOP in absolute free fall, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is emblematic of that. Notice that Biden is just doing a. He's like, basically, oh, really? You're going to govern by executive order? Watch this. Hold my beer.
To the
Hold
point
my
that,
beer.
except to the point that the New York Times tells him to slow down. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
no. And the answer is no.
Mhm.
The answer is I'm aware of the fact that the rules have changed. The answer is I'm aware of the fact that I have 2 years to do what I have to do. Maybe a dysfunctional GOP can come back and win some seats back in 2022. Although I got to tell you, I can't imagine a single voter looking at what Joe Biden is doing with COVID, looking at the competence with which Joe Biden is trying to tackle this economy, looking at the competence with which Joe Biden is and the common decency of the immigration policy, and thinking anything other than, holy shit, we want these crazy fuckers back again? I don't think so. So there are elections that validate the other way too. There are elections where the executive branch party consolidates power in the midterm elections.
So, Seth, explain something to me because I've never understood it completely. The filibuster and action. Explain it to me. Just
I mean, you know, I tell you what, why don't we just bracket these two back to back? First, we'll do a dissertation on the filibuster, and then we'll do a dissertation on options buying and what's happening with GameStop and Dogecoin.
Explain both of them to me.
Sure.
Okay?
I mean, how many heads do you want to make explode today?
Okay, so let's do the filibuster because all I thought is, okay, that guy's amazing. He can stand up there for 14 hours and just talk. I mean, that takes a lot of physical strength. So tell me what it really is.
Some trying to understand the rules of the Senate, I think, is intentionally obtuse. I don't think they want us to understand what's happening in the Senate. I think it's a little club. It's the same thing as when I went to the Thomaston election, when I went to the town hall on election day, and there's Pete, you know, a guy here in town, and he's got a stack of ballots in his hands that is about ready to be counted. And he says, geez, I think these people are going to want to actually come here and vote. This is terrible.
So the filibuster, take two.
Well, you need a certain amount of votes for certain types of legislation. If it's a budget-related item, you can accomplish that through a process called reconciliation, where you only need 51 votes to pass. Most of the time, you need 60 votes to pass a piece of legislation that goes beyond that. Obviously, there's no way in the world in this political environment that you're ever going to get 60 votes to pass anything. Since Chuck Schumer is in the majority technically in the Senate because of the miracle of Georgia and Georgia turning blue. By the way, Jack, North Carolina is going to be the next state to flip blue. Jeff Nappersack Jeff, how do I pronounce your last name? I know I'm butchering it. I apologize. But as you sit in North Carolina right now, that's the next state to turn blue. And it's because Jews like Jeff keep moving there. Thank you, Jeff. That's a really great job. We appreciate that. Now, and the Jews and the registration of African American voters. Now, in the Senate, if you are speaking on the floor, you have the right to continue speaking and block legislation that would come up. And the Democrats have an opportunity to change that rule so that that doesn't exist anymore, so that the Naparstek. Thank you, Jeff. Naparstek. I hope I'm doing that right. Jeff Naparstek. It's going to be my ringtone. Jeff Naparstek. So you're welcome. So the filibuster is just a simple rule that can be changed by the majority with what I think is referred to as the nuclear option, because it dramatically changes the dynamics of what's going to happen if a simple majority can pass legislation. It's meant to be cumbersome to get 60 votes by design, so that you don't have the tyranny of the majority. You want to be able to have some checks and balances, and yet those checks and balances were designed for a time when the founders assumed that there wouldn't be this type of insanity in our electorate and with the elected officials that we have. And I can't imagine that nuclear option of getting rid of the filibuster can do anything other than empower Democrats now. I got to tell you, the idea that Republicans are going to be able to capture a majority again in an increasingly diverse country is they're watching their party die, and they know their party is dying. And I would like to mention to you that Jeff Flake, former Arizona Senator Jeff Flake, posted a tweet the other day that said that as of the time of that tweet, and that was last week, buddy, 960 something Republicans in Arizona canceled their party affiliation. That is the margin of victory in many elections in Arizona. Actually, that exceeds the margin of victory in many Arizona state elections. And that is literally the tip of the iceberg. Those 10,000 Arizona Republicans are emblematic of what's happening with Republican parties around the country. There are Republicans who are leaving, who would join a Lincoln Party if it could do anything. They can't. What they can do is they can join a Lincoln caucus within the Democratic Party and exert influence that way. And we've argued for that before. And full transparency, I'm working towards that. I'm not a Republican, so I have very little say over what happens inside Republican party politics. And really, I'm considered an enemy rather than somebody holding out an olive branch.
But you refer to it as the Lincoln
Lincoln Caucus.
Lincoln Caucus within the Democratic Party. Why does it have to be within the Democratic Party and not independent?
Because we don't have an opportunity for a third party to have any legislative influence in this country at all. We have winner take all elections. We don't have power sharing for second and third place like you would in a parliamentary form of government where you have to form a coalition. And it just doesn't work that way. A third party it's why Bernie Sanders is sitting by himself as an independent. He caucuses with the Democrat. It's why Angus is sitting with Bernie as an independent. He caucuses as a Democrat. The independent, the label of being an independent, is merely a declaration of independence for the self. But in terms of legislation, Bernie doesn't get a lot of legislation passed because in this sense, he just sits there with his mittens and his snowblowing coat in the Senate. He just sits there and doesn't play well with others and would rather be right than govern. And that's Bernie. He's a and it's unfortunate because he's the brand of democratic socialism in the United States.
Okay, that's good. Let take us now to this GameStop thing, which I haven't studied, so I don't understand it. You will, right. So explain it to me.
This is one of the greatest stories of all time. AJ comes in the room last night, holding up his phone, leading like a freaking, like some kind of Roman gladiator with a freaking, he's like so motivated. His face is just the biggest smile I've ever seen. He's glowing. He's happy. He's laughing. And he's got this phone he's going to show me. He's going to show me where Dogecoin is and where GameStop is. In our financial system, we have a financial instrument that is called an option. It is a way to guarantee and lock in a certain price on an equity. An option gives you the right to buy or the right to sell a specific stock. If you buy an option, they have this is what nobody's really talking about in this particular instance, but it's a contract which has an expiration date. And the expiration date is called, it's exactly that. It's a drop dead date. You have to do something with that option at the date.
And what you didn't say is this instrument, this contract involves a specific price.
Right.
Okay. Just
thank you for that. And I didn't say that yet. And what I also didn't say is it's not the actual equity, it's a bet on the actual equity. And as such, it puts the buyer of that bet in a position. The position is I am either optimistic that this stock will hit this price by this date, or I am pessimistic that this stock will hit this price by this date. And if I am pessimistic, I sell that stock short, either with or without owning it. I'm speculating that this stock is shit. And people are going to find out that it's shit. I know it's shit, and people are going to find out that it's shit, and it's going to shit the bed. So the stock is 100. If the stock goes to 10 by January 31st, and I short the stock, I have the option to buy it back and make up the difference. If it's $50, I make $50 minus the cost of the option and the time value. Same on the other side. It's speculation. Many people, including Elon Musk, feel that it's like a future, right, Jeff, but a future is what you buy in commodities. An option is what you buy in equities. Jeff wants to know if it's kind of like a future. It is like a future, but it's a future is pork bellies, heating oil, and in the commodities market, if Jack owns Jack's heating oil and Jack wants to guarantee a price to his customers all winter long, Jack buys that option, that future contract, and locks in that price for his customers, and there's no more disagreeing about it. I can advertise I'm selling heating oil at $2.59 a gallon. I figure in the price of the futures contract, and I take delivery on that specific date based on gallons. Now, people like Elon Musk have suggested that shorts and people that engage in this kind of speculation, like hedge funds, are anti-American. I agree. I think they're betting against the American economy. But that's a philosophical position. That's not a pure marketplace position. In the marketplace, we're dispassionate about this. We don't give a fuck unless we're the business owner, in which case we really do give a fuck. So the idea that people short a stock depresses the stock price because there's negative sentiment about the stock. You look at the number of short positions there are in a stock, you can quantify that, and it goes into your attitude about the stock. What has happened in this marketplace is the same thing that Seth and Jack have been talking about in the broader universe in terms of technology. Because what has happened is people who felt an emotional attachment to GameStop rebelled against institutional hedge fund investors who were, in my opinion, trying to take down a sacred cow of the video game population, the video gamer population in the United States. And these are people that have been sitting on their asses for a year, not spending any money, looking for something to do with their savings. And they thought, let me go to an online trading place. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow this Reddit thread that suggests that, you know what? If there are enough little guys that use technology to work together, we can impoverish these hedge funds. So these hedge funds, which had massive short positions in GameStop at a much higher strike price, these people, at a low strike price, these people, the GameStop Reddit buyer group, started driving the price of the stock up with the specific intention of fucking these hedge funds in the ass and forcing them to buy back the stock because they are short the position. And if you're short the position, you have to buy back the stock at the market price. And if you own the stock, if you're short the position at $10 and it goes to $300, guess what, genius? You got to buy that. You got to buy that amount of shares at $300 before the expiration date of your short contract. Otherwise, you receive the most terrifying news in the world when your broker or market maker calls you and says the words margin call. Guess what, Bob? You've got a margin call. In other words, you don't have enough money with us to cover what it is that you're supposed to be doing. And in so doing, these young video game addicts, video game fans, people who utilize the technology all day long have now become marketplace activists, and they have democratized this idea of the financial markets. So this has a real Occupy Wall Street flavor. It has a real technological innovation flavor, but it also extends to other stocks. So this idea that the marketplace itself failed to take into consideration the technological changes in our culture that Seth and Jack talk about on a tri-weekly basis previously and on a weekly basis going forward in the future, this technological revolution, this communications revolution, has just resulted in an unforeseen eventuality that just happened to cost institutional investors tens of billions of dollars. And AJ walks, the same kid, my son, walks in to my office yesterday and says, help me set up this account. I'm going to go buy Dogecoin tomorrow. So I help him set up the account. And when he said this to me, Dogecoin was, let me just put it to you this way. Dogecoin is up 200 and some odd % at the open of the market this morning.
So how did the market in general respond to this unique paradigm?
I mean, this is a drop in the bucket for the market writ large, but the truth of the matter is that it will be a new dynamic that is going to have to be taken into consideration by short sellers. And to be honest with you, the market is much more liquid, I think, when there's no shorts in the marketplace. And the market is much more transparent for the little guy when there's no shorts in the marketplace. So I'm all for this. I'm anytime there's a democratization of something that is owned by people who are exclusionary, you have a problem. Now, the platform on which all of these trades were taking place is called Robinhood. Robinhood, as you may recall, Jack, stole from the rich and gave to the poor. Yesterday, or the day before, Robinhood did a really strange thing. Everybody who had bought GameStop on their platform and was interested in buying more GameStop on their platform was told by Robinhood, no, you can't buy more equity or options in Robinhood. What you have to do is liquidate your position or nothing. And everybody thought, holy shit, Robinhood got a call from institutional investors and is fixing the market, is rigging the market. No, you can't take a long position. You have to take a short position or get out, right? Well, that looked really fishy. And AOC, who's been tweeting about this for a couple of days, rightly said, this is a fucking outrage. You mean to say that the little guy can't invest in the stock market and only institutional investors can buy more stock? Does that sound American to you? To which Ted Cruz said, I agree completely. And now there are congressional investigations into why this is going to happen. I predict these congressional investigations go absolutely nowhere, because what actually happened is the clearinghouses for Robinhood and other platforms. These are apps. It's a 30-year-old guy that wrote an app, took his Series 7 and 63 exams, and he's a market maker, right? What actually happened is the clearinghouse for these apps that sell stock called Robinhood and said, you have exhausted your capital requirements with us, and you can no longer transact business in this equity. There are capital requirements that are necessary for these types of transactions. And so what seems like market fixing is not market fixing. It's actually a mechanism of the marketplace. Now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez sent that tweet back to Ted Cruz, and she said the following, Jack. And what I'd like to do is I can show it to you. I think you're going to enjoy this tweet from AOC. I thought it was funny, and I hope I can actually see it. I hope this is it. Hold on a sec, Jack, because I think this is something that our viewers really should see. And this tweet says, you know, Ted, I'm happy to work with Republicans on this issue where there's common ground. But you almost had me murdered 3 weeks ago, so you can sit this one out. Happy to work with you with almost any other GOP that aren't trying to get me killed. In the meantime, if you want to help, you can resign.
Oh, I love that. So, Seth, let me chime in here. And that was thank you. Thank you. You, on both fronts, have provided me, the filibuster and GameStop, with a great explanation. Now,
Well, thank you for asking.
okay. What I want to recommend to people is a film you probably haven't seen because it sort of came out under the radar. It's called Margin Call. And it's about a night in 2008 where one of the big brokerage houses realized they were fucked. And it, Stanley Tucci, some great actors in it, okay? And it's some computer guy who was an analyst, lower level analyst, worked up the numbers, and they had to call everybody in the middle of the night, including the owner and chairman, CEO of the corporation.
It's great.
And the film is wonderful. Jeremy Irons plays the head of the corporation.
Brilliant.
You saw it, Seth? Did you see it, Seth?
Brilliant. And what I love is the scene where they're all up in the middle of the night at AIG, by the way, which is the company that we're talking about.
Right.
And American International Group, they're all up in the middle of the night. It's like 3:00 in the morning, and the guy that played Spock on the Star Trek movie series,
right,
and another guy, they're quants. They're basically the nerds they're the math nerds, and they basically say, hey, what's been happening here in this mortgage market? And everybody's like, yeah. He's like, it's going to crash everything. All these people that have been using their houses as a piggy bank. Well, we've done the math, and it looks like the country is going to come crashing down in a tremendous economic collapse. And we're holding those, a lot of those mortgages on our books right now. And these people are, they're just overextended, and our greed is going to come bite us back in the ass. Because those mortgage-backed securities were nothing but pure profit and it's ridiculous they didn't see this coming. But people use the equity in their homes as piggy banks. I know because I was a mortgage broker in 2005,
mm-hmm.
and I'm partially responsible for this collapse of our American economy.
A very small bit. And the Jewish satellite, Seth. I mean,
right? No,
I'm learning about you now that I really wish I didn't know.
What, that I was a mortgage broker?
Yeah, as well as something about the satellite.
Or that I have a Jewish laser that can fry you at any moment.
That's the satellite I'm talking about.
Right.
What did you call it? The satellite?
That was the you mean the
6 or 15 or something?
No, we can come up with a new one. The Blue Schmeckelinator. the Putzitron. And when you shoot the laser, it makes an impression on anything it hits in the shape of the Star of David.
I love it. You put something up on your page that I just saw that I love. It's Know Your Nut Jobs, Seth. Okay.
Yes.
So
yes. Would you like me to, Jack? Are you going to be surprised to hear, Jack, that I staged it?
No.
Are you going to be surprised to hear that I staged it on the page?
Okay. So let's go through these types just to sort of help edify our audience.
Good. You want to do it? You want to do it, or you want me to?
No, you go ahead.
All right. So know your nut jobs. Starting at the top from left to right, the QAnon nut job. Rather than admit that Trump is insane, these people believe his rants are secret code, which they alone can decipher. So far, they haven't been able to actually make any sense of Trump's nutty tweets, but they'll keep trying. You know what? That's bizarrely accurate. Let's see if the Proud Boys is as accurate. Proud Boys, military wing of the KKK. White supremacists with a bad case of testosterone poisoning. That's what my daughter would call toxic masculinity. They hope to start a race war, which they insist on calling the Boogaloo for some obscure reason. This next one is kind of self-explanatory. This is the incel, sexually frustrated misogynists who both lust after women yet hate them at the same time. They suspect that all women everywhere have conspired to prevent them from breeding, and looking at them, they may be right. Then we have the anti-Semite, the most ancient of all the hate groups. They believe that Jews are to blame for everything they don't like, that they don't like. They both deny the Holocaust and yearn for another one. They love to tip over tombstones for some reason. The flat earther. These people hate every scientific discovery made since the Middle Ages. They spend a great deal of time and money trying to disprove obvious facts. They are still searching for that crystal dome that covers the earth. The tinfoil hat. These people believe that the alien lizard people are using the Illuminati to secretly run everything. They're certain that they, quote, end quote, are trying to control their brain waves because they know too much. Actually, the funniest of the nutjob groups. The end-time theologian. Although God said that no man may know the hour of the end of the world, these people believe they've figured it all out. They're certain that Trump is either the Antichrist or the second coming of Christ, not sure which. And then finally, the one that Lincolnville is filled with, the Gravy Seals. Too fat to actually join the military, these guys love military gear, even if it's hard to find body armor in their size, willing to die for their country as long as they don't have to climb any stairs.
Seth, I gotta
know your nut job. Jack, know your nut job. Jeff has another name. Jeff has another name for the Jew laser, the Schwanzenator. The Schwanzenator. The Schwanzenator and the Putzatron. I got to tell you, Jack, I'm reading this American Compromat, and it is, as I'm reading it, I'm able to answer the conspiracy theory nut jobs in my Facebook threads as I go along. It's miraculous the amount of truth about Trump that is contained in these pages. And the difference is that they're all confirmed by historical context and other facts surrounding those experiences. It makes so much sense when you hear it. And then you're kind of inside this book, and you get into the book, and you're reading the book, and you get outside of that headset, and you think to yourself, holy shit, the implications of this. It's mind-blowing. Simply mind-blowing.
So what are the implications of this?
The implications of this are that, our number one enemy in the nuclear arms race had as its puppet the President of the United States, and went about doing as much damage as humanly possible. And I got to tell you, Jack, the idea that we're in a global pandemic now and that the Trump administration slow played as much of this as possible. If I was trying to sow as much discontent in a community as I possibly could, in a country as I possibly could, I would start a disease that killed 5% of the people that it infected, or 3%, or whatever it is, that perpetually mutated. And it's kind of like there's no reason why Trump acted the way he did, other than he couldn't admit to his own mistake. But to be honest with you, why wouldn't they buy enough vaccine? Why did they stonewall every single opportunity to deal with this disease effectively for a year? Why? What's the end game? Who benefits from that inaction? I mean, even the most simple-minded political operative in the White House would have said, this is your opportunity to get reelected, full stop, end of story. All you have to do is make this disease public enemy number one. And if you're interested, attach it to the Democrats.
You know something? Absolutely agree. At the same time, I thought it was so iconic and indicative when Trump said, COVID, COVID, COVID. That's all people are talking about.
Yep.
Because they weren't talking about him. That is the level of simplicity that this guy thinks at.
There is no way that the total depths of Trump's depravity can be hidden from the American people. It's all coming out. And it's not only because we have a Democratic administration, we also happen to have a free press in this country. There's no way that this stuff isn't coming out. And the only reason that he lived in an absolutely tone-deaf bubble. He's not in a position now to have a voice or to influence policy. His comeback would signal the true death of not only the of the Republican Party, but of American politics as we know it. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what a one-party government in the United States really would mean. There has to have something happen to the Republican Party so that it can balance the political scales in this country, but truly balance the political scales in this country. We're going to have a fractured political system because as far as we can remember back, even before the Civil War, we had effective two-party governance in this country where people could get together and enact bipartisan legislation. And the idea that slavery is the thing that drove us apart was not a moral question as much as it was an economic one. But now we have a question of the psychology of human beings driving themselves apart from each other and making it impossible to work. So the GOP, on the one hand, it has to die. It has to die in order for us to move forward. But it can't die in order for us to move forward because we need it. We're not a Bolshevik system. That's why I called the Republicans, the Trumpists, the fascist Bolsheviks. They're the Bolsheviks. That's why I advocate going after these fascist Bolsheviks in every single local race you can possibly get your hands on. There is no position that is too small to deny a Republican. Dog catcher. Mm-hmm. We can't have a fucking Republican dog catcher in this country and be safe. Not the way it is now.
You know, it's interesting to think, when in 1985 or 6, Apple was about to go tits up as a company.
Yeah.
And Microsoft realized they had to invest in it because otherwise they would have been guilty of all sorts of potential market control.
Anti-trade, all sorts of antitrust shit.
Antitrust shit. And they invested $100 million, which back then was a bit of money, in Apple.
It's a lot more now, isn't it, Jack?
So you think? So the question is, are we going to end up having to invest time and energy into the GOP just to keep it alive?
Yeah, that's what my concept of the Lincoln caucus would be. But really, if you're a Republican, like, who's registering Republican now? But if you're a Republican and you're a traditional Republican, like a sane Republican, you're in the 20% of the Republican Party, or what now may be the 30% of the Republican Party that doesn't necessarily believe that there's a Jewish laser that starts forest fires, or that I don't know, what are some of the other crazy things that we've heard from these people, Jack? That there are lizard people operating a pizza parlor,
right? A pedophile pizza parlor. Yeah, it's endless.
All the QAnon kooks. Where do you go? Are you gonna register independent? Are you gonna join the Democratic Party and observe Biden's behavior and his ability to bridge the gap between AOC and the Rick Wilsons of the world? Because, to be honest, right now Biden is in a honeymoon that I can't see going wrong or becoming shortened, because he's not making any missteps so far, and he is doing all the governance things that people want him to do. When is that going to stop? I mean, I think Joe Biden's doing a great job.
Yes.
And I think Joe Biden's common decency, he's not lording it over the GOP. He just puts his head down, goes to work. This pretty girl shows up in the press conference every day, tells us what's going on honestly. If she doesn't have an answer, she says, "I don't have it. I'll get it to you." It's not a pack of lies. It's a return to sanity. Well, so if you're in the GOP and you want it to be sane, where are you going to go, Jack?
Well, Seth, here's the thing. It's not the fact that we understand what he's doing and we think it's absolutely wonderful. It's how this is being interpreted by the right. And it is being interpreted just like Jim Jordan would say, or Nunes, or one of these morons. It's being interpreted as authoritarian government. That's the way they interpret it. That's the way they see it.
Well, yeah, but, just like Mr. X on Facebook, these are now seen. It doesn't really matter what they call it, because on the Democratic side of the political spectrum, you have people who have absolutely shut their ears to any information coming from the right. In the middle of the political spectrum, you have independents who, by and large, reject Trumpism. And then, slightly to the right of that, you have disaffected Republicans, that 20% we were just talking about, who's leaving the Republican Party in droves. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a question. Who is Jim Jordan signaling to here, other than a base which is contracting and contracting? It's a lump of coal right now, but it's going to be a frigged up diamond of core fascist authoritarians unable to govern, and that's going to be the Republican Party.
But this is a group that Ted Cruz is chasing like he's a starved hunting dog.
It's all he has.
Right?
It's all they have left.
I guess that they've put all their money on the table. And it's shrinking. You know what I mean? you're right, but they cannot retreat anymore. And that's why we see them as so fucking nuts because they've committed. They committed too early. It's like the short sale. They committed at the wrong time, and now they just have to stay with it. And it's going to be fascinating to watch Ted Cruz because he is one evil motherfucker.
Yeah, he is.
He's really, whoa. Yeah, fascinating, Seth. How are we doing time-wise? I think we're about
well,
there.
up to you. Up to you. Jack and I are going to talk about what's going to happen. I think we talked about doing a weekly show at a different time. So we should probably tell people about that because, we're not going to be back on Monday. What we're going to do is we're going to post when we're going to be on. I have a bit of a professional commitment that I'm now involved with, which makes being on in the daytime not possible for me. I have to do some professional training to get up to speed to get back out there and start up my business again. So Jack and I are going to reevaluate when we can come on and do this so that it's convenient for both of us. I think the rapidity of it, especially in a post-Trump world, is a little bit more difficult because the material simply doesn't present itself the way it used to. Am I speaking out of school, Jack? Is that right?
No, I think it's 100% right. It's really difficult now. I mean, we literally could stand there and report on a 3-ring circus. All rings were going all the time, 24/7. Endless stream. And rather than become repetitive in our ideas, which we tend to do, it would be better just to let the whole week now sort of settle and be able to address it in one show.
Yeah.
That's the way we feel. And Seth is going to really try to take a job that he can finally hold down. Sorry, Seth.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we should really, I think we should talk about that snarky comment that you just referred to, which was pretty funny. But I think we have to let the bankruptcy courts inflict a little bit more damage on the individual that you're talking about. And then we can, because that's all public record. And then we can do a special show on it.
And the Mid-Coast of Maine is like every other small town. We have some serious assholes in this town. I mean, serious assholes. And
then, the funny thing about it, Jack, is I was working 80 hours a week doing 2 different full-time jobs. One of them bailing out that asshole because he needed help. And that's the comment that I get.
Mm-hmm.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, but
dude, I've forgotten more about the business world than you'll ever know.
But then again, people react if you say they have Eurotrash taste. Everybody's going to react to that, particularly someone who prides himself in his.
Well, I tell you what, if you think that insulting our country, coming here from another country and insulting our country is going to go unpunished by American patriots, you're wrong. If you think that insulting the native peoples of this country is not going to go commented on, I'm sorry. I'm going to call you out. By the way, you should know some very influential people instant messaged me and asked me to do that because they couldn't do it.
Oh, great. Influential people. These are the best people, Seth.
The real best people. They're the real best people, Jack.
Influential in Camden, Maine. It's like the fastest car in Buffalo.
Anyway, these are nationally influential people, I should say. Anyway, somebody who's not got cranial rectal impaction disorder, who was outraged by this, asked me to intercede, and it had already begun. I mean, he was already getting a shitstorm of feedback, for insulting for these horrifically ill-informed insults that this individual was spewing. So I'm sorry.
Okay.
I called him out, and
Let's do a closing question. I don't know what you had for breakfast this morning, but it looks like you spilled it all over your T-shirt. I'm just wondering whether it was oatmeal. Yeah. Oh, it's a wave. I'm sorry. Oh, I thought you were saving something for late lunch. I'm sorry, Seth.
No, that's Hokusai's The Great Wave. It is one of the finest pieces of artwork of the past millennia. And that is. Oh, you did?
Yes.
You were just making fun.
Yes, I was.
Okay, I get it.
It's like Eurotrash taste. So anyway, Seth, let's say goodbye to our audience of one.
Yeah, we're gonna do we think a Friday night hangout, Jack?
Yeah, I think Jeff is our one watcher, and he certainly provides us with a lot of comments. And
yes.
Great to talk to you guys, and we'll let you know when we'll get back on.
When we're back on.
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you, Seth.
Thanks, everybody.